The number of people being deported from Canada is at its highest level in more than a decade. According to the Canada Border Services Agency, more than 18,000 people were deported from Canada in 2024. That is the highest number of people since 2012. Those deportations cost taxpayers more than $78 million. The new numbers have immigration experts raising questions over how the system is working. For more on the concerns, we're joined by Aisling Bondi, president of the Canadian Association of Refugee Lawyers. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you on. CBSA data shows that since 2019, the number of people deported from this country has spiked 55%. So what are the factors that are driving the increase?
When we look at the numbers, it's overwhelmingly failed refugee claimants who we see are being removed from Canada. That is causing the increase. The increase is really happening there. And to be clear, these aren't people who have criminality in Canada or anything like that. It's just they had their refugee claim. They were found not to meet the legal test. And also not everyone who is found not to meet the legal test doesn't mean that their claim was found to be not credible. It can be, for example, that they didn't meet the test for some reason, like the adjudicator found, like, yes, I believe that this organization wants to harm or even kill you if you return to your country, but I think there's somewhere that you could relocate within your country where they wouldn't have the motivation or the ability to locate you, or maybe where the police would be able to protect you. So that's what we're seeing is people who are on the other side of the refugee system. There was an increase in the number of claims over the last few years. And so these numbers may simply track with that, but it's not clear whether we might also be seeing an uptick in terms of the pace of removals that are happening. So maybe people are being deported more quickly after their claims if the government is looking to prioritize deportations of failed refugee claimants.
Let's talk about the amount of money spent on deportations. It has increased, as we know, over the past decade. Since 2018, the federal government has spent more than $380 million on deportations. So when we see a number like that, I mean, specifically, where does this money go?
The money is largely spent on the flight. Sometimes people will pay for their own flight to return home. Other times it will be the government who's paid it, so it'll be that, as well as the cost of the officers who would be organizing the removal arrangements from Canada.
You've raised concerns over BEC 12. That bill would allow Cabinet to cancel several immigration documents if the government believes it's in the, quote, public interest to do that. That bill, as we know, is currently in the Senate. How could that legislation affect the numbers that we're seeing?
Absolutely. We could see an increase even further. And our concern is that this increase we're seeing now might actually be a ramp up to increasing deportations if that bill is passed. So one of the essential elements of that bill is that it's going to permanently ban a lot of people from being able to make a refugee claim in Canada. Instead, they're going to get a written process and without the right to a hearing. And if that written claim is refused, there's no right of appeal. Instead, all they can do is ask a federal court judge to review the decision, and they don't have an automatic stay of deportation while that review takes place. So they can be deported even while a judge is reviewing the decision. So our concern is that they're ramping up. So basically, someone makes a claim, they're found not to be eligible, they're put into this written process instead, and then they might see a swift refusal of their claim and then be swiftly put into deportation proceedings before that judicial process can play out. So that is a significant concern for us. Also, with the government giving itself the ability to cancel immigration documents, and there's very little in there about limiting the scope of when they would be able to use that, we could see people whose immigration documents are canceled being put into removal proceedings as well.
Well, Aisling, we reached out to the CBSA, who did provide us with a statement. So I'm going to read part of it. It reads, quote, all individuals who are subject to enforcement action in order to be removed from Canada have access to due process before the law. If eligible, they can submit a pre-removal risk assessment to Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada if they feel they may be subject to persecution in their origin or their country of origin. And once individuals have exhausted all legal avenues, they are expected to respect our laws and leave Canada or be removed. I also want to point out that they say there are several ways people can redress and that they only enforce removals after all legal action of recourse has been exhausted. When you hear that, what are you hearing?
Yeah, so I mean, those are options that are available to some people, even as they say, for example, the pre-removal risk assessment, some have access, some don't. But also, while there are some recourses that are available to a person facing deportation, these recourses are incredibly complex, opaque, and almost always of all the applications in the immigration system are those that are most going to require the intervention of a lawyer. This is not something in most cases that someone can do on their own. And so when we hear about this increase in deportations, this like very sudden uptick, it concerns us that the agency is going to prioritize numbers, speed of getting people out the door, rather than fairness of the process. And so, for example, if one of the things they can do is not give people a lot of warning before they're deported, and some of these legal measures that we can take can only be done once they're given a formal written notice and the date of when they're going to be deported. And so if they only give someone, for example, 1 or 2 weeks of notice, that can really limit the options that are available to them. And we see some really sympathetic circumstances where someone's being deported. It could be, for example, they've married a Canadian citizen, they have a child together, they filed a sponsorship application, but it just wasn't filed in time enough that it's going to prevent their removal. They might require life-saving healthcare treatment that they can't access back home, like chemotherapy, dialysis, and the system needs to give time for that to be played out. So when we see these numbers increase, it really concerns us that the pressure on officers to get people out the door is going to cause them to take measures that can impede the ability of people to access these recourses.
Well, Aisling Bondi, thank you so much for your thoughts this morning.